Hello and welcome to my video all about how to knit a two-colour Picot cast-on. As you can see, this cast-on method creates picots along the starting edge, and I'll be using two different colours. One will be a cream yarn for the border, and the other will be a mustard yarn for the main body of the picots. Right, so the first thing you need to do is take your first colour of yarn, which will be the border, and make it into a crochet chain. You'll want to make quite a loose crochet chain, and you'll need about 7 stitches per picot. So make a slip knot at least 6 inches from the end of your yarn. Then take your finger and thumb through this slip knot, grab onto the working yarn and pull a loop of it through, like so. As you can see, I like to hold the slip knot in my left hand and make the loops with my right hand. Then just repeat that as many times as you need. So take your finger and thumb through the last loop that you made, grab onto the working yarn and pull through another loop. Then pull through another loop and another, and so on. Note that you don't have to make the entire chain that you're going to need all in one go. Instead, you can take a stitch marker or a safety pin and attach it to the last loop that you made. This will mean that it won't unravel, and also you can add to it later on. If you take a closer look at this crochet chain, you'll see that on one side you've got V-shaped stitches, and on the other side you've got kind of oval shapes with bumps of yarn in the centre. You can easily put your knitting needle into one of these yarn bumps, and it's these that we're going to be knitting into. Now just lay down this chain like so, with the slip knot on the right hand side. You then need to take the other colour of yarn that you're using, which I'll refer to as the second colour, and tie a slip knot at least 6 inches from the end. Place this slip knot on one of your knitting needles and tighten. This will be your right hand needle. Next, you want to take this needle into one of the yarn bumps on the back of the crochet chain. You don't want to go into the bump that's right next to the slip knot, and as you can see, I went into the second bump from the slip knot. You want to do this from back to front. You then need to take this same needle through the next yarn bump along the chain. Again, from back to front. This time though, you need to take your other knitting needle and take it from front to back through this same yarn bump. Make sure this needle crosses in front. You're now in a position to do a knit stitch. So take the working yarn for the second colour and complete a knit stitch. You now need to knit the next 3 yarn bumps in the chain. So take your right hand needle through the next yarn bump from back to front, and take your left needle through the same yarn bump from front to back, making sure to cross the left needle in front. Then complete a knit stitch. And then repeat this 2 more times. As a side note, you might notice that sometimes in this demo I split the yarn. This is because I'm using quite a loose, super bulky yarn that's very easy to split. I have to say I found it easier to use a more tightly twisted, lighter weight yarn. So that's just something to bear in mind. You should now have 4 knit stitches in total, plus a slip stitch and a slip knot. You then need to take your left hand needle and use it to pick up the second stitch down on the right hand needle. Then take it over the stitch above and drop it off the end of the needle. Next, you need to knit a stitch into the next yarn bump in the chain. So do this exactly the same way as before, taking your right hand needle from back to front, your left hand needle from front to back, and then knitting a stitch. Then once again, use your left hand needle to pick up the second stitch down on the right hand needle, take it over the stitch above and drop it off the end of the needle. Then repeat this once more. Then just knit into the next bump of yarn in the chain, like so. Then turn your work and purl 3 stitches, making sure that the working yarn is at the front. Then turn your knitting again and knit 3 stitches, this time making sure the working yarn is at the back. You then just need to slip the next bump on the crochet chain onto your needle, and this has finished 1 picot. And the result is a picot in the second colour, with the first colour as the border around the outside. If you take a closer look at the border, you can see that all the V shapes in the crochet chain line up. You then just repeat this process from the point where you did 4 knit stitches. So take your right hand needle into the next yarn bump in the chain and do a knit stitch. And then repeat this 3 more times. Please be careful that when you're knitting into the crochet chain, you're not twisting the chain at all. I like to look at the V-shaped stitches on the front of the chain to make sure they all line up. You then use your left hand needle to pick up the second stitch down on the right hand needle, take it over the stitch above and off the end of the needle. Then knit a stitch into the next yarn bump in the chain. Use your left needle to pick up the second stitch down on the right hand needle, take it over the stitch above and off the needle. And then repeat this once more. Then knit a stitch into the next yarn bump in the chain. Turn your work and purl 3. And turn your work and knit 3. And finally, just slip the next yarn bump onto your needle. And that's the second picot finished. I'm now just going to make 1 more picot. So that's 4 knit stitches. Take the second stitch over the stitch above, then knit 1. Take the second stitch over the stitch above, and then again, knit another stitch, turn your work and purl 3, turn your work and knit 3, and finally slip a stitch onto your needle. And that's it, that's how you make these 2 colour picots. All you would then do is make as many picots as you want, then turn your work and purl all across all the stitches on your needles, except for that first slip knot. There will be 2 slip knots at the beginning of your work, 1 on the crochet chain and 1 on your needle. You need to undo both of these and then weave the yarn tails into the back of your knitting. Here you can see another sample that I knitted, but this time it's in a lighter weight DK or double knitting yarn. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.